You're listening to the Limitless Business Podcast with Scott Oldford, and unfortunately, Kay won't be here today. She had something that came up, but I'm super excited to have Tucker Max on today. Tucker is someone that has had success in a very unconventional way from what a lot of the people that we bring on the show. He's sold millions upon millions of books, has set amazing records in the bestseller list, and he has probably one of the coolest businesses now that he's working on that I've ever seen. So Tucker, thanks so much for coming on to the show today.
Thanks for having me, Scott.
So I want to, just for the people that don't know you, which I wouldn't say there are too many. So you started back in this entire, I guess, game about 15 years ago, right? So it was about 2000.
Yeah, I guess it is 15 years, right? I never think of it as being 15 years, but yeah, I started writing and kind of internet stuff 2000, 2001, yeah.
So at that time you would have been about 24, 25, and you've had a very crazy life when it comes to writing books about all the things that have happened to you. And I just want to go back in time a little bit. What kind of, when you start writing these stories about these experiences that ended up into, the book, I Hope They Serve Bear in Hell, and the other three that you published along with the movie. What got you to actually write this on a website and, kind of say to yourself, hey, someone's actually going to want to read this?
Right. So the whole story, it's one of those things where it's a perfect example of falling into something, but then picking up that football and running with it. Like whenever people say to me, oh, well, you got lucky. I'm like, man, it didn't feel that way, because my start was lucky, but I put in a lot of work after that luck. And I think a lot of people don't realize they see successful people, and then successful people make this mistake too. They'll create sort of like an ex post narrative of their success where it makes it seem inevitable and easy, right?
Yep.
And so the real story of my success is a lot of luck mixed with a lot of hard work, both. So I basically, in law school, after we graduated, my friends and I just would trade emails back and forth because we were all lawyers and hated our jobs and they were awful. Although I was actually working for my dad running a restaurant. I was the only non-lawyer, but we all hated him. And
this was in Florida, right?
Yeah, I was living in Florida at the time. I went to law school at Duke, and we all went to different cities. And so, we would all go, when we were in law school, we'd all go out together at Chapel Hill and get drunk and act like, idiot 24 and 25-year-olds do. And then we'd laugh about it the next day, in the law library or whatever. But once we went to different cities, we couldn't do that. So I wrote emails about this stuff. I kept doing the same stupid things after law school. I didn't grow up like my friends did. And I wrote emails about it. And apparently my emails were very funny because my friends would forward them around to other people in other social circles. And I knew they were funny, but I thought you had to know me and my friends to think that they were funny. Like, sure. My only goal was to make my friends laugh and to occupy some of my time in the awful cultural wasteland that is South Florida. And so eventually I started getting my emails forwarded back to me from people I knew in other social circles. Like, they'd be like, really? Oh, did you read this funny email? This guy sounds like you. And I'm like, I don't know, you're old enough, but some of your audience might not be old enough to remember when people sent emails around with lots of headers at the top, right?
Yep.
Everyone over 30 will remember that. But my stuff was some of the original stuff that was done that way, and I'd be like, asshole, scroll down, look at the header. That's me. I wrote that email, right? And they'd be like, oh, it sounded like you. And so, long story short, my dad fired me from the family business. My name's on the door, right? It's called the restaurant company is called Max's Grill, and I got fired. And so after that, I'd already been fired from a law firm. And so one of my buddies in the books was like, look, you're clearly not good at law or at business, but you're very good at writing. These emails are the funniest things I've ever read. You should do something with this. And so I was in that weird space where it was like, okay, I've gotten my emails my writing forwarded back to me. Clearly people like it. So how do I become a writer? And sure. Remember, this is 2000, 2001, right? 2001, really, at this point. This is before, forget blogs. This is before MySpace. This is before Friendster, right? This
is way before anything.
This is back when Yahoo was a startup and shit, right? GeoCities existed, stuff like that. And so the idea that you could like write on the internet was people laughed at that. That's like, I don't know, watching porn in a movie theater is, like at the time, that's like, oh, who would ever do that? Same thing. And so I didn't know what I tried to I sent all my writing to like every magazine and newspaper and publishing house and agent I could get an address for in New York City. So there were probably seriously between 500 and 1,000. And I got, not figuratively, I mean literally in the real dictionary definition of literally, zero positive response.
Wow.
Zero.
Wow.
And even some editors actually took the time to write personalized rejections to me. Like, you're such a terrible writer. You need to, go whatever, do something else, not be a writer because this is the worst stuff I've ever read, and blah, blah, blah. I got into writing so that people like you wouldn't have a chance. Stuff like that, like to make sure your stuff like what you write doesn't get published.
Totally rejected. And how did that make you feel? Like, were you at the point of saying, "Screw this"? No one.
No, I'm one of the other types,
right,
where it's like you can't do something. Fuck
right.
you! I'll show you I can do it. Right?
Yep.
I'm one of those, and sometimes that works to your benefit. Sometimes it doesn't. In this case, it did work to my benefit, and I sometimes I want to say I have a lot of confidence, which is true. But I think in this case, what I had was a lot of hubris, actually. And I have both. As I've gotten older, I've gotten less hubris and more confidence.
Right.
But at the time, I was mostly hubris. And so I thought, because I had gotten my stuff forwarded around and emailed back to me, it had to be amazing. Right. Which, to be honest, doesn't necessarily mean it's amazing, but probably does. But I was far more confident than honestly I probably should have been at the time. Which in
but
cases
that
of
sort
startups,
of happens. That you kind of got to have that, or you're kind of screwed, right?
Right.
But everybody,
to go over that hump, you almost have to have that almost irrational confidence. And so that irrational confidence is what led me to kind of go down the rabbit hole. And I thought it'd be really easy to go from internet famous stories to or email famous stories to famous author. Little did I know it was going to be like a 7-year path and a huge amount of work. I never would have done it, right? But because like step by step, I just approached it step by step, not on purpose, just by accident.
Sure.
I was not smart enough to understand what I was doing at the time. Now I kind of figured it out, but then I did not. And I just kind of got lucky. So I put in a lot of hard work, refused to quit, but then I also got really lucky in a lot of different ways in that, I didn't know how much hard work was coming. I didn't know how bad the odds were against me.
Complete bliss by just simply not knowing, which I'd say majority of people that, I went through this. I had a super successful company when I was 16, 17 years old, and I had no idea that it was successful. And you literally do things by, this might work, and then it works, and it's like, okay, well, that wins, so I'm going to do it again.
And then you also think that you're a genius, too.
Oh, and then you think you're unstoppable. Right? You're like, you know what? Fuck it. I'm just gonna do everything.
Clearly all of my success is due to me and not any other factors. There's no luck involved.
No luck. Everybody else doesn't matter.
No help from anyone else. Yep. Even the people that help me, that doesn't count.
Yep. No, I completely understand that exact moment of feeling I'm fucking unstoppable. And did you ever watch the movie Limitless with Bradley Cooper in it? Yeah. That was like my life. For like 5 years. I felt like I was taking that limitless pill, and then it all came crashing down.
Same with me.
Yeah, exactly.
It's always the way it works, man. That's Icarus. You fly too close to the sun, eventually the wax melts.
Exactly. So then you publish, I Hope They Serve Beer in Hell in 2006. And that has been obviously, I remember it was probably 2009, the first time I picked your book up.
Right.
And I instantly fell in love. And then I remember my fiance now, first when about 4 years ago when we got together, I remember one of the first, I bought her the book again for Christmas because she's like a really, really cool chick. And so I remember lying in bed and us like reading the stories and like dying laughing. And then I think we bought the second book, and then the movie came out, which I watched on Netflix. And I haven't read the last two. But in this entire formation from 2006 until now, I mean, that's not really like the reality of who Tucker Max was. And I actually found somebody that knew you like back in the day, like by mistake the other day. And like,
who? Who was it?
I won't say it on. I won't say it on air. I'll say it off here afterwards.
Okay,
But
okay.
anyways, like this was like way before you were famous, and so it was really funny because I was just having a casual conversation, about the fact that about the podcast, and you were coming on the podcast, and they're like, I actually know him like back in 2002, 2003, and like and this and this and this happened. And I was like, oh,
Right,
that's cool. But so you had this very different tone back then. How
right.
did you change? I'll say have you changed your personal brand at all? Are you trying to change from being, I mean, you're 39 now compared to 25. I would assume
Right.
some of the stupidity, the things that you
Let's
did.
hope.
Yeah,
Let's hope I'm not stupid.
yeah, exactly.
God
Right.
forbid.
So I mean,
Right.
you have a daughter now. You've
Son,
obviously a
son.
son. Sorry,
Yeah.
a son. Obviously, you matured a bit. How has that transition gone from being, the reckless 25-year-old that writes his stories about, the craziest sex stories I've ever read to, now Book in a Box, which we'll talk about in a minute.
Right. So, well, basically, we just kind of talked about how, like, both of us, like, you have some success and then you think you are king shit on Turd Island, right? So I went through that, and I went from hardworking and like full of hubris, but also humble and. I'm actually in the middle of writing a speech for this other sort of conference that wants me to give a keynote about the right way to succeed versus the wrong way to succeed. Because
Right.
I feel like I succeeded. I succeeded in the first part of my life, but I did it the wrong way. Not saying what I did was wrong, like hooking up or drinking or whatever. I, I, I should have made $50 million, and I probably made 10 or 20% of that. And the only reason I didn't do as well as I could have is because how stupid and arrogant I was, and I limited my own success. I mean, I can see it so clearly now. I can see
And we
so
like to
many
sabotage
decisions.
ourselves as well, right? You get a bit.
No, see, I wasn't a self-sabotager. I was just so arrogant
Right.
that I didn't listen to anyone else, and I didn't learn from my mistakes, and I made decisions for the wrong reasons, and I thought I was way smarter than I was.
Sure.
So the self-sabotagers definitely, but that's sort of like a different type of person. I was the other type of person where I thought I couldn't be sabotaged by myself or anyone else, right?
Right.
And so basically, what happened? It kind of all culminated with the movie, and there was a movie made about my first book, and I helped produce it and co-wrote the screenplay, and it didn't do well at all. It did really bad.
By the way,
especially in theaters.
I liked the movie, just so like I thought it was a good movie, but
Well, I didn't like it.
You didn't like it? Well,
No, I didn't like it.
it wasn't like a, for the fact that I guess that would have been I mean, did you go into that being like, hey, I can take on the world, screw these guys that are typically writing movies?
No, the screenplay was amazing. We wrote an amazing screenplay. We got offered $2 million from Fox Searchlight for it and turned it down so that I could I could own all the royalty, all the underlying IP and sequel rights.
Right.
I basically pulled the George Lucas deal. So I did shit that you couldn't do, right? I did it. And I made not one single mistake, but a whole bevy of mistakes. And all my mistakes were related to who I chose to work with and how I chose to work with them. And they were all basically came from the idea that it kind of didn't matter who I picked. I'm so awesome, I'll make it work anyway.
Right.
Which is possibly the worst thing you can do on a collaborative, creative project, which a movie is, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And so even though, like, we had a terrible director who ruined the movie, but at the end of the day, I'm the one who picked the director, right?
Sure.
And we had a lot of other problems on the movie, and I could frame it so it's not my fault, but the reality is, if you really look at the chains of causality, it's basically all my fault. At least at some point in the chain of causality. If I had been way wiser and more mature, I could have avoided all of the problems that I ran headlong into.
But I think by having that leadership there, and by saying that, hey, this is all my fault. I mean, it's sort of one of those things.
Well, I didn't have that at the time.
Right. At the time you were pointing fingers, and then looking back, you're like, wow, I was a fucking idiot.
Yes, exactly. But see, no, but I'm answering your question indirectly, right?
Sure.
So here's the thing. So you asked, like, how did I make that transition? Well, first I had to fail.
Right.
And I failed very publicly. and it wasn't a catastrophic failure financially or anything for me for the movie, because like I had someone else finance it, whatever. But like it was a very public failure in a way that cracked my grandiosity and my way overly large ego. And it forced me to really look at some hard truths about myself and the way I made decisions and the way I thought about things and the way I dealt with some people. And so it took me, that was 30, in fact, I know exactly how old when the movie came out because that was my Jesus year, like I turned, not that I'm like that religious, but
Sure.
yeah, so it took me after that about 2 to 3 years to kind of emotionally recover in a lot of ways
Sure.
and to build up the courage to be honest with myself. And of course, I had a lot of people around me who helped me, friends and loved ones. And so then I ended up retiring from fratire. So at the end of my last book, Hilarity Ensues, I kind of wrote like a little mini retirement where it was like, look, I had a great time. This was awesome. But my stories are about a certain period in my life where I did a certain set of things and I just don't do those things anymore. I have nothing else to write about this. This is the end of the road for this. Thank you for being fans, and that's it, right?
Right.
And so I don't write any more of that stuff, whatever. And the way I made the transition out was honestly just dealing with really honestly looking at myself. I went into psychoanalysis and I'm actually about to finish up. I spent 4 years
Awesome.
in. And psychoanalysis is a type of talk therapy. There's a lot of different types. You can use meditation. You can use any number of other things.
Sure.
I chose psychoanalysis because I tend to be a very rational, logical thinker, and it's good for people who tend to be verbal and rational, right? Which is not everybody, but that's just me.
Sure.
And so it worked really well for me, and it was really fucking hard. And it's not like I'm fixed now and everything's better. Really, all psychoanalysis does is help you understand where you're wrong and give you, or where your problems are coming from, and gives you the tools to address them and fix them as they come up. And then you understand, as you go through your life, your problems are going to reassert themselves over and over and over in different ways. But if you have the tools if you have the ability to recognize them and the tools to deal with them, then your life is 90% easier, right?
Yeah.
And so that's sort of where I am now, and that actually kind of is a good segue, right? It leads us to Book in a Box because it was almost like once I figured all that out, then all of a sudden this new thing fell in my lap.
And then, from what I've read about it and just kind of experienced it, you were at some type of conference. You met a CEO and you were talking about book writing, and obviously you've had 3 books in the New York bestsellers all at the same time. Which is pretty crazy, and you essentially yourself and Zach, which is your COO at Book in a Box, you essentially took this project on without even thinking of it as, I would assume, a bigger business venture.
Yeah.
And now you're, not ghostwriting, but a completely other process than ghostwriting. Because ghostwriting, I have a negative connotation against it. I would assume a lot of people.
It's a shitty process. It doesn't work.
Well. Yeah, exactly. And so, as someone myself, I just published I just put out, I can't say published because it's self-published, but I just put a book out last week, and not a huge book whatsoever. And I was actually in contact with Zach, before I even reached out to you. And kind of just going through the process. And so tell about, I guess, how that process and how that story kind of unfold, and how you're helping people that are like me, that have a bunch of different book ideas, but just not the.
But you don't have the time or the ability to write, or the desire.
I have dyslexia. I have all kinds of things that are probably more self-limiting than it is. But at the end of the day, if I want to get a book out, I'm like a real book, like a 250-page, 300-page book, I'm not going to be writing it. Exactly.
So this is exactly how the company started. Is I was at like an entrepreneur sort of dinner, and this woman she came up and she's like, "Look, she has this sort of company that she's built in retail. It's a pop-up retail, which is sort of like this new thing where different brands have like little mini stores, and you kind of display all this sort of stuff. And it's really hot in retail, and she's like one of the big names in it. She kind of like helped pioneer it and stuff. And so she's like, I've had all these people who told me to write a book. They can't, like, she's a really expensive sort of to hire her, like Target and all these companies hire her. Sure. She's really expensive. And so like she's like, I want to write a book to kind of teach this to people, show it to the ones who can't hire me, like increase my authority and visibility. I'm like, yeah, of course, it makes total sense for you to write a book. And she's like, well, I don't have any time. And she actually, I think, is dyslexic too, if I remember. She might not have been, but the big issue I know for her was time. She's like,
Yep.
I can barely, have time for my own business. I don't have time, sit down hours at a day or whatever and write a book. And I kind of it's so embarrassing to even talk about because I remember this so clearly. I kind of got this condescending look because I've had people my whole life be like, once they find out you're an author, they're like, oh, I have a book idea. And then basically 90% of the questions are, how do I get a book without writing a book, without doing the work?
Exactly.
And I've as much as I hate the arrogant elitist literature snobs, I've still in this one area I've always agreed with them that being a writer is hard and that's part of the process, and that you can't have a book without doing the work. That's literally sort of how it works. And so I kind of gave her that speech, and she rolled her eyes at me, right? And she's like, okay. She goes, Tucker, are you an entrepreneur? I'm like, yeah, of course. I like to think I am. She's like, okay, well, I am too. And in my business, I solve problems.
Right.
What do you do in your business? And I was like, oh, all right. And so basically, she's like, help me solve my problem. And I'm like, okay, fine. And so she totally called me out, was totally right. I was being an elitist snob and not even realizing it, which is the worst part, right? And so I went home, and it took me a couple weeks, and I finally realized, all right, all she wants is to get her ideas into a book. She doesn't need to actually write it. The more I think about the writing process, the more I really broke it down and really questioned the assumptions, I realized, yes, writing is a great way to make a book, but it is not the only way. There are other ways.
Right.
And in fact, if you can get her ideas out of her head, organize them, put them into her words, and put them into a book, why does she have to do anything but talk? Why can't she just talk her ideas out? So I got together with Zach, who worked for me at my old company, and I'm like, look, I have this idea. Let's see if it works. And I didn't even know if it was going to work. But basically, he got on the phone with her, and we all three of us, and I helped her outline her book. What do you want to say? How do you want to say it? Whatever. And in this case, it was really easy because it was basically instructional on pop-up retail. And then we did a detailed outline, 3 to 4 pages. And then Zach spent an hour a week over the next month just interviewing her about each. There were 4 sections, each section, right? Okay, tell me, what is pop-up resale? How do I do whatever? And a normal interview.
Right.
And so we recorded the audio, got it transcribed, and then we gave it to an editor friend of mine who's really smart, and she essentially translated the audio manuscript into book prose. So
Wow.
they just following the outline. So it was Melissa's words, Melissa's ideas, but written in book prose and clear, because an audio transcription, if you actually look at a direct translation, it's not readable.
Not at all.
It's got to be turned into writing. So, and it was great because the editor, she only spent, whatever, I don't know how many hours, but the equivalent of $3,000 worth of work for her, which she does ghostwriting, and her ghostwriting project started $50,000.
Wow.
And she did 4 days of work for us and charged whatever, $3 or $4 grand or something like that. She's expensive, make no mistake about it, but it was really cheap and it was easy work for her because all of it was there. She was just making it sound nice, right?
Exactly.
And then we took the manuscript back to Melissa, and she's like, this is amazing. This is exactly what I say and think. This is my voice. This is everything. It's amazing. Then we did all the rest of the publishing stuff, ISBN, book cover,
Sure.
all this kind of stuff. Put it out. By the way, it's crushing for her. It's only sold maybe 1,000, 2,000 copies, but she doesn't really care about selling books. She cares about using the book to get media exposure, which she's been on 20 different media outlets now. She's signed 2 huge clients because of this book. She's gotten all this. She's keynoting 2 retail conferences, all the things that a professional can use a book for. She's been the case study for. Yeah, exactly.
And what the crazy thing is, because it's so true on the sales side. I put mine out, and I think we're at 2,600 sales, which is way more than I was ever expecting for a limited budget and everything else. But
Right.
when you put that out, it's your credibility just triples. And as soon as someone can say, and someone booking for a conference, and your speaker fee just went up by 3 or 4 times, and especially if it's in the case that if you for 15,000, it's $15,000, right? But between 15
Yeah,
to
yeah.
25.
Our fee's 15. Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, for $15,000, for anyone that's in business or anyone that has clients and this type of thing, I mean, $15,000 is very achievable, and it just makes so much sense. I mean, I can go on the phone, I can just talk and talk and talk and talk about this idea, that idea, experiences I've had, all these different types of things. I get in front of like a keyboard, and for someone
Everything changes.
and I mean, I failed my grade 11 English exam 19%. Like, I'm a shit writer. Like,
Well, no wonder you had to be an entrepreneur at 16.
yeah, yeah, exactly.
You're not made for school. You're
not
made for life.
Yeah, I made exactly. So even the one I just did, I wrote a first draft, and my writer came back and was like, "I don't know what to do with this," and like, and so yeah, so one night about 1 a.m. I ended up putting out another first draft. But I mean, that was 60 or 70 pages, and that's all I'm ever going to be able to do. Like, I peaked. So something like this is for true entrepreneurs. Every entrepreneur should have a book. I mean, every entrepreneur has these crazy. Every person, not even entrepreneurs, every person has these amazing.
Every serious professional. If you're a speaker, a consultant, C-level executive, entrepreneur, those are almost all of our clients are those people, and it's funny. There's nothing better than a business where you're making a lot of money and you're providing way more value than you're making. Right. Almost every single one of our clients are like, you could charge me double or more, and I would still do this. This is such a great value, and we're making great margins. Like, we're doing fantastic. There is no business better than the one where you have perfect product market fit. Like, we're growing so fast, and really our limit right now is finding talent on the back end, right? Who can maintain high quality. That's where we're limited now, not customers.
And what's really interesting about your model is so Infinitus's model is identical to yours. Like, we don't have, like, I'm the only employee in the entire company. Right. And that's what attracted me to the entire concept when I was listening to the James Altucher podcast that you were on, right. Is the fact that you'll take that $15,000 in that client and bring them through the entire process, and you have the best of the best because they're contractors, and that just kind of goes to show 20 years from now we're all going to be, for the most part, contractors, right?
Yep. And, no doubt.
And that's what I love about, like, the book in the box, because you look at every other industry and you can literally do it in every other single industry. It's
almost,
just, right? You can literally do this for anything. And there's so many new businesses that are going to be able to be out there because of the fact that we have the specialists having, a couple generalists at the top, bringing them all together, and then going and finding the clients and the perfect fit, right?
All we're doing, really, once we have our process basically set at this point, and the process it's easy to describe. It's a little bit more complicated to actually run it on the back end. So it took us about 3 or 4 months to really nail it. And because I come out of writing and all this, it was easy for me, right? But once we have the process set, then really all we are is a customer service company and a marketing company. We're bringing clients in the front door, and a talent acquisition company. We bring clients in the front door, we manage the process, and we find the very best freelancers to work with, and that's it. That's all we're doing. Once we have our good process, it's pretty nice. We have one employee. There's Zach and I as co-founders. We just hired our first employee, like a project manager to handle, like, the whole thing. And, we might hire one. We think at most we're going to have 5 employees total, and that's it. Everyone else is going to be a freelancer. And that model, we can scale up to, God knows, 50. It's up to at least 100 plus clients a month doing that.
So, and I read your LinkedIn article, which was, you did about $200,000 in the first 2 months. So you're in month what now?
7 or 8. I think February is month 8.
Gotcha. Fair enough.
Yeah, we're over $500,000. That's
awesome. And the beauty of that is you don't need any office. You don't need any. You literally only need a phone line.
We have almost no overhead. We don't have to raise a dime for this company. It's really nice. Yeah, it's really, really nice. I like it a lot. Like, we haven't spent any money on marketing yet. We probably will at some point, I'm sure. But like so far, our marketing has really been almost just podcasts, that LinkedIn article, and word of mouth. We're kind of testing different channels,
Sure.
to see what works better and where we get the most ROI. And then once we find like the channel, all right, this is the one we're going to hit, then we'll start there and kind of spread out. The other idea actually that we had, and I didn't think about this really at the very beginning, but once I saw the process kind of work, is there's a lot of people who want books who can't afford $15,000.
Right.
And there's a lot of people who want fiction. Right now, we're only nonfiction. Our process really only works for nonfiction. So we thought we're going to try, maybe in about 6 months, we're going to start building the platform out. We're going to maybe do Book in a Box as software as a service, where you can kind of basically have an algorithmic program walk you through every step, that you don't have to do really any thinking about the process at all. You're just answering questions or talking about stuff or picking book covers or whatever. That's it. And because it's a software guided process, with probably a little bit of human interaction at various points,
Yep.
we can do it. We can offer this service instead of 15,000 for 1,500 or even 150, depending on sort of various things. And we can do it for fiction, because fiction be much harder to do with a person. But once you have software doing it, and there's not a labor cost,
you can do what. This goes back to the fact that I've sort of developed the rule that if anyone asks me about something more than 30 times, I'm going to write a 60 or 70 page book about it, because the amount of times, like I have a podcast book, how to get a number one podcast, because I've gotten quite a few I've helped other friends get it, and I have so many people that ask me. It's probably 40 or 50 people that ask me now. I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to write a book, because if 50 people ask, and I can tell them, why not? Same thing for webinars, same thing for marketing funnels, same thing for, how to build a SaaS-based application, all these different types of things that I just know and I can talk about for 3 or 4 hours. Why make someone pay, my hourly fee, when it's like, here's the book. If you want to jump on a 30-minute call afterwards, no problem. But there's no need to, have you pay for my time when here you go.
Especially for the basics and the easy stuff.
Exactly.
Yeah, pay $2.99 for the bbasics, and if you need more, okay, I'm $500 an hour. Happy to talk to you.
Exactly. So do you see that the future of, you look at Kindle, you look at the Amazon store, literally, I have so many friends that have books on there that is quite literally ridiculous. And I think at the end of the day, it's only going to get more and more and more like this, since people can say, you know what? I know a lot about putting IKEA desks together. Yeah. and I'm going to write...
the instructions suck. I know that.
Exactly. I need the American version of the instructions. And I'm going to put a book together, and they can log into this, by 2016, 2017, they can log into this system, and it'll literally guide it through. Because I think the biggest problem is, when you're writing something, is you don't know how to start. Right. And I know when I did the first draft, I just wrote, and then gave it to an editor. The second time.
And they said, "What the hell? I don't know what to do with this."
Yeah, so the second time, I just completely, wrote out. I think I was drinking rum that night, which was probably why I was actually able to write a little bit. But the biggest problem is that it's like, how do I start? Do I start at the table of contents? Do I start here? Do I start there? And if you can guide someone through that after all the experience of guiding other people through that, I think that's going to be fucking amazing. So I'm excited about that. So that's bookinthebox.com, right?
Right.
Mm-hmm. So that's Book in the Box. I'm probably going to be a client to this, because I want to do a book called The Unfair Advantage, which is basically going to take all of the lessons we've learned from all the people we've had on the podcast and put it into a book.
That'd be good. That'd be a good book.
Which is, not only a good book, but the second thing is, it even limits the amount of time I have to talk even more. Because the podcasts are already there.
If you don't want to listen to all 70 of my episodes, just read the book.
Here's the book.
The best stuff is in the book. That's actually fantastic.
Yeah, so I want to do that. And I mean, from a marketing scheme, it's perfect, because every single person is part of that book now, and they're going to, share that. So I'm looking forward to doing that. The other thing I wanted to kind of chat about a little bit, that I know that I haven't seen it online a whole lot, but you have a podcast, The Mating Grounds, and I know that you're writing
totally different project.
Yeah, so let's talk about that a little bit. So it seems to me a little bit kind of like, I went on there, I listened to 10 minutes of the podcast, enjoyed it. I enjoyed the whole the Joe part of it.
Helping Joe?
Yeah, helping Joe. I thought that
that's a
was
brand
pretty
new
cool.
series.
Yeah, I thought that was pretty cool. And you kind of like with just one mic.
No, but that's because I explained at the beginning. You heard the explanation.
Yeah, no,
because
I did.
Because Charlie's mic was off. It's just that one episode.
You know,
I'm not like one of those weird heavy breathers in the mic.
Funny. I was on the phone the other day with the airline company, and this guy. I mean, he was just.
He got the mic right up to his mouth.
Yeah, and
like people would do this. Right. It's like, what are you doing?
I had to ask him to. Stop breathing. Stop breathing so heavy.
You do this for a living. You should be able to not breathe into the mic.
So this is all about dating, sex, the things to do. I would assume as a single guy wanting to have a girlfriend or whatever it would be. How are you competing in that world when you have, Jordan from the Art of Charm and all of these different types of people? What niche market are you going for right there?
Here's the thing. It's more of a sort of a side project, a hobby for me. It's not really a business.
Sure.
We basically, Dr. Jeffrey Miller and I, he's one of the leading evolutionary psychologists in the world. He and I, and sex researchers, he and I met at this conference one time, and long story short, we kind of like realized that the book that we wished existed when we were kids to teach us about sex and dating and women didn't exist.
Right.
And we realized that there were probably not two people better suited to write that book than he and I. Like, he has all the science credibility and knowledge. I have all the sort of street cred and writing ability. And I know the science decently well, and he's like, got a lot of good understanding of women and stuff in his own life. So it's like, let's put this together and do a book. And so we actually started with the podcast. The book comes out in September, October. We just finished it,
cool.
like this week. It comes out in the fall. The podcast just started almost as a whim. Because it's just easy to talk about this stuff. We were basically talking about the book, and I said, let's just record this and do it as a podcast. And then the podcast took off. Like, we've done 1 million downloads in the first 4 months or 5 months, however long it's been up. Right? I know.
Yeah, wow, that's impressive.
It's a lot, I know. And we haven't really done much to promote it. Very little, actually. Actually, way less than we should. But here's the thing. I think the entire model for men's sex education online, like the dating, pickup artist, seduction communities, are basically all scammy bullshit.
Yep.
And so what we're going to do is we have two things that we're doing different. First, all the information that we have, we're going to give away for free or near free. So like either you can listen to all the podcasts, or you can pay for the book, and it's like $14 for an ebook or whatever. It's just a normal publishing thing, right? And so it's free or near free. And so there's not going to be any like
boot camps
right. There's no here's our secret info that's the best that works. That's $1,000, and you have to pay for that. That's fucking bullshit, right? I hate that model. It just drives me nuts. We're not going to do that. And then also the other thing is we don't. The vast majority of the pickup artist information is really fucking bad. Like, their perspective on women is so wrong and so bad and so toxic for most guys. Yep. We're not telling guys the same things, just giving it away free. We're telling guys very different things. Not only things that are more effective, but also things that won't make them feel like scammy losers, and things that don't make them look like douchebags.
Because those, and I mean, I have just as a background, back when I had that internet company, I helped do all the marketing for one of the first pickup artist guys, and in that process, I knew the material just as well as anybody because of the fact of having to market this. And I mean, quite literally, it brings you out of the other end, very unhealthy when it comes to sex, when it comes to honestly anything, right? You literally feel like in the process of talking to another girl, you feel like you're scamming her out of of just being a girl.
Like, yes, their entire approach is transactional. Yep. Like, create a transaction with a woman who's not a human being. Like, exactly. It's antithetical to anyone who's not a sociopath or an autistic. Yep. Anyone else, their entire perspective is totally flawed and toxic and fucked up.
Completely.
Yeah.
And so what I liked about about your website, and about, what you're working on here, for at least for what I can see, is that it's very much more upon the lines of, there's plenty of people out there that aren't good with women. All right. There's plenty of people that are not advantaged. They don't have the unfair advantage of just naturally knowing how to talk to somebody, regardless if it's a woman or not. And then the beautiful thing is that I found is that, when you the same skills that are going to get you further to get the girl that you want and the girl that person deserves is the exact same formula in your own business, in your business life. You know what I mean? Like, it is the
They are
exact
similar.
yeah, I mean, it's if you're looking at least from my perspective, there's probably a 10% or 15% difference, in terms of that.
It's funny you say that, because we actually thought about structuring the book, like using the titles and headlines sort of similar to what you would be to start a business. But then we realized even less people are good at starting businesses than are good with women. So the metaphors would be lost on our entire audience. So it would be a terrible disaster. But you're right. There's a lot of similarities of the two things.
Yeah, so I mean, I really like that, because coming from that world and seeing, more just completely objectified compared to, hey, the reason you're doing this is so that you can, be the person that's also deserving and deserves. I really like that, because that's been...
Well, the point of dating is to have a relationship. Whether
Yeah.
it can be a short-term relationship where you just hook up, it can be medium-term where you hook up for a few months and that's it, or it can be long-term.
Exactly.
And so you need to start from the perspective of understanding, I am trying to get into a relationship or lots of relationships with women, whatever,
Sure.
right? And once you understand that, then you understand, oh, I have to be attractive to women, right? So otherwise they won't want to be in any sort of relationship, long, short, medium.
Doesn't matter.
And then what is attractiveness about? So we have to explain all of that, and then we explain like conversation. We go through all these sort of things that really all we do is unpack a bunch of assumptions that no one else understands or talks about in the dating space. Like, if you really, I'll send you a copy of the book. You'll read it and you'll be like, oh, I've heard all of this in 20 different other spaces, like this confidence stuff. No, not together and not applied to mating. So the confidence stuff I've totally heard, like, like I've read these books about and whatever, and Baumeister and all these people I've read. And then the sort of like the creating a plan and all that, that's exactly right out of Ariely and all this other stuff. Yep. And then the attraction stuff is basic biological evolutionary psychology. And if you're really well read and really smart, all of this information, you've probably seen all of it. Yeah. All we do is put it all together and make it really simple and really clear and really actionable for normal guys. And so far we've had, I mean, even just from the podcast, we've had tons and tons of guys, like, you wouldn't believe the emails we get. Oh, thank you, you've changed my life, and blah, blah, blah. And it's really kind of, it seems basic, but it seems basic to you and me because we're in our late 30s and we've learned all this the hard way, right? But if you're 22 or even 28, you don't know this shit. No one tells you.
Well, the two things that that the high school and schooling really fucks up on is, one is money, which they totally fuck up on. And number two is sex relationships, anything to do with
any social relationships.
So you're in school, you have social relationships which are not even remote, and then you go to, most people, I never ever went to college or university, but most people go to college or university. That's totally like that's even worse, because you wake up 25 in the real world. And
you've never been prepared for money or relationships. And you're like, which are the things that matter the most.
Exactly. So you're fucked with money. You have debt. You have credit cards that were given to you when you're 19, and like, just don't max it out. And and next thing, you're a Friday night at a strip club, and it's max it the next morning. And so
at the strip club, because you can't talk to girls because no one ever talks to them.
Exactly. So this entire vicious cycle is here. And until you're about 30 years old, you completely have no idea what the fuck to do, right? So I think a book like that is needed, and I'm looking forward to reading it. And I think the other side of it too is that a lot of people think they need coaching. on this type of stuff, doing it in real person, that type of thing, like 90% of it is just what you think of yourself. You know what I mean? Like if you go in, it's just like business. If you go in thinking that if you go into a bank thinking that you're going to get 1,000.
Chapter 1 for us.
Yeah, exactly. If you think that girl is going to give you her number 99 out of 100% of the time, she's going to give you her number unless you're, completely unattractive or whatever.
Chapter 1 is confidence.
Yeah.
Number 1, first thing we talk about, because your mindset determines everything that happens after that. And we explain what confidence is and exactly how to get it in your life, whether it's life in general. Like general life confidence and mating confidence, you get the exact same way. It's basically just demonstrated performance.
Yeah.
Just practice, demonstrate, and repeat until you have confidence that that's at that level, and then move up and keep moving up. It's very simple. It's very simple to do and to understand. It can be harder to do, but really the problem for most people is not understanding it. The problem is actually implementing it in their life because they're afraid of failing. And then we kind of explain how to deal with failure too.
Yeah, exactly. And I assume some of because by the sounds of it, you went through the failure of something very publicly, not financial failure, but very publicly.
It's way worse, man.
Is it?
A public failure is way worse than financial, because you can always make more money. If I just lost money and everyone thought the movie was amazing, then no one would know that I had failed.
Right.
I went the other way around. I actually made money on the movie, but the movie did really poorly at the box office and really poorly sort of as a commercial endeavor. And I mean, I don't care about critically, but it didn't do well critically either. And so it was like pretty much it was a failure in all the public ways. And then of course I had set myself up to make it as bad as possible, because all I did in the lead up to the movie and press was talk about how amazing the movie is and how great it was going to do and what a genius I was. Which of course,
but you didn't
all
actually
that
believe
does
that.
Is create enemies, right?
Yeah.
And it sets you up to fail. So it was like I basically did all the worst possible things. You could take how I dealt with the movie almost all the way around and make it a playbook on what not to do.
So as a kind of a segue to the end, so you have the book in the box, you have the mating grounds. Is that really where you're focusing? Where do you see all of those things, past the SaaS based application? I mean, you're no longer the 25-year-old that just does whatever. And you're more into a trusted author, somebody that, a true entrepreneur, these different types of things. So is there anything else that's on the horizon or the cool ideas that you're sinking your teeth into?
No, I mean, that's a lot what I've outlined. That's a lot to do. This is actually, it brings up a good point. One of the really big sort of principles that I've learned to adhere to that I was really bad at is focus. Exactly. So I only have 3 things in my life that I worry about: family, my wife and my kid and my dog, and then friends and whatever, everyone that I care about. Book in a box is like number 2, and then kind of a distant number 3 is mating grounds. It's sort of like a hobby. It's important and a hobby, and that's it. Like everything else, almost every single thing else, the personal stuff, working out, stuff like that, right?
Sure.
But like taking care of myself, which you can maybe include in family, but that's it. Like I've stopped doing, I'm going to be an investor and I'm going to be a speaker and I'm going to be an astronaut and I'm going to be a news anchor. No, you can't be everything. You can be one thing that's amazing and maybe have one hobby, and that's it. Yep. Now, you can do 20 amazing things if you do them in a row, like focus, nail it, move on. That's totally doable. A lot of people do that. But if you try and do 5 amazing things at once, you will probably fail at all of them. If you try and do one, you got a much better shot.
Yeah, and I think that comes from, because it happens to me like every year. At the end of this year, I was just kind of looking at what I wanted to do in 2015, and when I failed drastically back in 2012, 2013, I said that my biggest problem was I was investing in this and that, and I just have, I had like my name on 19 different incorporation documents.
19? That's astounding.
So I had, little pockets of money all over the place, and, I'd come in and
you gotta cut that shit.
Yeah,
man.
I'd come in and be like, we gotta do this. Yeah, exactly. So I said that until I rebuilt and I had $2 million in my bank account, I would only do one thing. And then last year, it would start with like, I started a second podcast. a daily podcast, which was a stupid fucking idea. I don't know why I did that. And then I was like, oh, I want to write a book, which was another stupid idea. You know, I did it. I proved it to myself, blah, 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 blah. But it was more of an ego boost than it was anything else.
Right.
And I start doing all these different things. And then my financial advisor, he's like, dude, you have to focus on just one thing again. And I think it comes down to like I don't know if everyone struggles with it, but for me, I'm kind of like, you know what? I only have so many years here. And I want to do like all of these things. Yeah,
I know, it's the tyranny of time. Like, it's so fun. I same thing, man. I don't understand people who are like, I don't know what to do, or I want to have a startup, but I don't know, blah blah. I'm like, what are you talking? There aren't enough hours in the day. I don't have enough lifetimes. Yeah, I know. Seriously, like, I feel like I discard a great idea maybe every week. I have a lot of ideas. Probably most are stupid, but at least once a week, I have an idea where like that could be at least a 7-figure business, maybe 8 or 9. You know, maybe even fucking 10 if I was a rock star at it, right? Yep. But like every week, I discard one of those. I don't understand people who can't come up with ideas.
I think for the most part, it's a self-worth issue, which is pretty much the reason why most entrepreneurs aren't successful. Right?
That's definitely a self-limiting, self-sabotage thing. Oh, I don't have any ideas. That definitely.
Well, even like starting a podcast and being like, you know, who I'm launching my new website tomorrow, and it took me a good 2 months to like pull the trigger on actually having like a personal website, because I'm just a fucking douchebag. You know what I mean? I'm just like a douchebag. You know, egocentric douchebag that don't care about anything if I'm doing a website about myself. But then I'm like, you know what? If I don't tell people that I actually go and speak, and I don't, no one will know. No one's ever gonna fucking know. You know what I mean? Like, if I don't record videos and do podcasts and everything else, there's so many opportunities out there for people to be able to learn, and I can aid that. And here I am in my like little like couch of self-pity, being like, well, you know, why am I the one to do it? And it's like, well, fuck, who else is, you know? Who knows, if I don't do it, someone else might not. So,
yep.
Anyways, I think that's it for like awesome time chatting with you.
Yeah, definitely, it was great.
And if I mean, you know, just Google Tucker on it's Tucker Max on Google. There's all kinds of. I realize that your Tucker Max website is probably a little bit dated.
I know. It's funny you said you're putting up a new site. The TuckerMax.com site is being redesigned too, because it's sort of like not really what I do anymore. So it's like I got to figure out a way to
reposition that.
Yeah, well, I think I'm just going to take my old stuff and put it in one spot, and then the new stuff is elsewhere. Yeah, right. I don't know what I'm going to do. Well, I'll figure it out.
Just like all my old GeoCities websites archived somewhere, right?
GeoCities.
Anyways, brother, awesome talking with you, and I know that book in box is going to be huge, and looking forward to hopefully writing my book with you guys pretty soon.
Awesome. Thank you, man.
Talk to you soon.
Talk to you later, brother.